Hello, Dr. Summers.
Hi, Leah. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
Hey, it's so great to see you.
It's so good to see you.
Good.
So I have started recording, if that's okay.
Yes.
Um, but I'm really, really happy to have you here today, and as well as the awesome viewers that'll be watching this amazing practice brief we have with expert and extraordinaire Dr. Summers. So I'm going to begin our practice brief with kind of giving everyone a little briefer about Dr. Summers' work, her impact, and just the power that she commands both in her day-to-day work, but also the direction that she's going into in terms of continuing such power into both the university and community settings, which is so important to the work that is done at AADA and AMCD. So with that in tow, I will begin by saying Dr. LaTonya Summers is an award-winning assistant professor of clinical mental health and counseling at Jacksonville University. There, she brings a 24-year experience of clinical mental health and addictions counseling experience and conducts research on multicultural issues in counseling and supervision. Her work is featured in scholarly journals and at international and national professional conferences. Summers founded the National Annual Black Mental Health Symposium, a conference aimed to equip mental health counseling professionals with cultural specific skills to improve the mental wellness in Black communities. She serves as president of the Florida Association of Multicultural Counseling and Development. Dr. Summers has been featured in O Magazine as well, which is Oprah's trademark standoff magazine, which is super prestigious. So we're beyond excited to have Dr. Summers with us today. So I guess the first question we have before we begin is, what does multiculturalism mean to you?
My goodness. What does multiculturalism mean to me? To me, multiculturalism means honoring the unique differences that we all bring to counseling, to supervision, uh, to the world, pretty much. I've had the pleasure of doing lots of research on taking color blindness approaches. That means believing things like the only race we need to be concerned about is the human race. Those kinds of things. We all bleed the same blood. We put our clothes on the same way. We are all the same. And I have adopted that approach before. I raised my children. You don't need to see race. We're all the same. You can do just as much as, any of your white counterparts and those kinds of things. I have since learned the harm in not seeing color. So multiculturalism is honoring the unique differences outside of race or in addition to race. Most importantly, is seeing, honoring the differences between us regarding gender. And now that I'm an older woman, honey, honoring me for the wisdom and for age and for the grace that I've developed that I am developing as an aging woman. And not only that, just ability, sexual orientation and identification, as well as religion. Like all of these things make us a rich person, a rich society, and a rich profession when we can come and honor those differences.
Thank you. I love how your definition of multiculturalism really hits the intersection of the home, the personal, the professional, age,
Mhm.
sexuality, cultural, ethnicity. I think those pieces are so valuable, and especially kind of being women of color in spaces of higher education and counseling. Some of those elements get lost, right, in our conversation of multiculturalism.
Yes,
So,
lost unintentionally. And what I've learned, Leah, is sometimes intentionally. I remember being a doc student and wanting to frame my dissertation around power, race, and gender. And I was discouraged from including race in my dissertation. And when I made it known that I would do the Black Mental Health Symposium, man, I was discouraged again from focusing on race, but power and gender for some reason, maybe because it's more acceptable to practice feminism, sharing and equality and those kinds of things, or making things egalitarian, sharing power. But for race, for whatever reason, there's unintentional and oftentimes intentional disregard or discouragement.
yeah, definitely. And I think with that in tow, kind of with that resistance, I do think it's powerful, the ways that you have been able to infuse multiculturalism into your professional ethos. So the second part I was going to ask was, if you can kind of describe the value of multiculturalism in the work that you do.
There's been much value. One of the things that I say is I'm 4 years Black. And what I mean by that is this whole racial identity piece that I lost, right? You talk about, being in higher education, and the higher up you go, sometimes it's not okay to be Black or to bring that Blackness into space. Just bring your intellect, just be a woman, or, just acculturate, or just be, if you want to be successful, be as white as you possibly can by the way you speak, the way you carry yourself, those kinds of things. And so I adapted that and thought, man, if I want to be successful and get this thing and go higher, I'm going to have to be as white as I possibly can. But once I got into the Ph.D. program and, was met with so much resistance, I thought, LaTonya, you are not a Black woman trying to be Black, a Black woman trying to be white. These folks see you as Black, and you need to own that, because it was harmful to just my own psyche, my own person. Trying to deny a piece of myself and still being met with resistance. I'm like, it's no matter how white I can be, how white I think I can be, I'm not going to be accepted. So it was going into that DOT program and remembering and saying to myself, wait, so I can be Black, beautiful, and intellectual, and not just trying to be articulate, beautiful, in terms of address for acceptance and those things. And it was when I became to be fully Black and a woman, at my age, in a doctoral program where there were younger students, but having to adopt and accept all of these intersections became so much more valuable to me, that I began to bring those experiences to other people, knowing that there were other people out there matriculating life, navigating through life and certain journeys, not being able to accept all parts of themselves. How sad is that? It makes me sad to hear it out loud, to say, I couldn't be a whole woman. I couldn't be my whole self. It was really a negotiation of identities, of how Black could I be in this space? How much of a Black woman could I be in this space? You want a Black face and a Black voice, but you don't. No, you want a Black face, but you don't want a Black voice. Just negotiating all that. So all of that, honestly, to me, is value and power, coming into these spaces fully, and confidently and unapologetically, and giving other people of color permission to do the same. And that's where my work lies. And that's where the value has been. It's almost a liberating, freeing experience for people I come into contact with and be able to influence and mentor and teach and supervise. It's just been so powerful, freeing, and valuable.
Yeah, I think that's, first of all, so powerful to hear. I feel it viscerally, like even right now, like speaking to you digitally. It sounds like for me that multiculturalism is like a seed, and it's grown in so much interesting ways. And people are seeing you, the tree, the beautiful rose garden, but they didn't really see that seed that was like really turning in the ground to consider, who am I?
Yes. Yes, that's right. Who am I and who can I be? And that's how I got to Oprah, actually. It was, can you really be authentic at work? With the piece that I was able to do in June of this year, which was kind of the development of my own, coming into myself. But it is just so valuable. Otherwise, I think it's a disvalue to not incorporate multiculturalism
Mm-hmm.
into work, to be able to sit before a person and not even honor them by calling their names correctly. I think it's a disservice when we shorten people's names, or, what can I call you, so-and-so? Those kinds of things are devaluing folks, and it's not multiculturalism. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't know how to say that except like, my name's LaTonya, but folks have said, well, can I just call you Tanya? Or
No.
folks have approached me and said, well, can I call you LT? And I'm like, how that's just power and privilege that you could even shorten my name,
Yeah.
and again, that's devaluing, denigrating, and not incorporating multiculturalism. So again, it has so much value. And those are some of the things that I get to do in my work, where I get to value multiculturalism and bring awareness to folks about how to use your power and a privilege in a way to not devalue others, but to actually give people permission to shine and to grow and to be and to advance. there's room for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's enough.
No, I love that piece about there's room for all of us. I think that kind of answers the second question, but I know you might have a few more things to add, but especially with that piece just about there's room for all of us. But with that in tow, what role does social justice play in your work?
Social justice, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when you consider lifespan and why it's important to incorporate lifespan into social justice and advocacy. My father was a Black Panther, so his work has always been, fighting social injustice and being an advocate. I never wanted to be that because I saw him do it. I saw him be jailed. I saw him. And to me, being that was loud, drawing attention to yourself unnecessarily, going to jail unnecessarily. So as a young person, I thought, I'll never have anything to do with that. And then, so here I am, fighting injustice, but in my own way.
Mm-hmm.
Still not intentionally drawing attention to myself, but to do this work, it is attention. It's attention in itself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. When you become a light, you shine, right? So it draws attention to yourself. But social justice, tell me the question again. One more time.
The roles, what role does social justice play in your work?
Yes, thank you so much for reminding me of that. So I didn't want to be this, but this is, who I am, fighting social injustice. And I think it just came from becoming comfortable with who I am and seeing people still bound, being voiceless, being invisible, not seen, not heard, and marginalized, that I realized, wait a minute, LaTonya, you're not advancing and getting power and influence and privilege to not share it and pull other people up. You're a voice. You are a convener of some sort. And what are you going to do with the platforms that you've been given? And that to me has become social justice. I don't protest. I don't picket. I don't do those things. And the ways in which we think social justice and advocacy is, I've learned different ways of doing it. And so I'd say to your audience, we're probably already doing social justice, but sometimes we don't recognize it because it doesn't look like what we think it looks like. So it's very important to who I am and what I do. I can't imagine doing my work and not shedding light, sharing power with people who are less fortunate than I am. I mean, if it wasn't for someone doing it for me, I wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be here. And so I want to take that to folks who want to be here and who deserve to be here as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like cyclic, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah,
narrative.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So with that in mind, why is it important to consider the lifespan development when working with clients, given your background as a counselor as well?
Yeah, one, that's just social justice and advocacy for our profession. That's the thing that sets our profession apart from psychologists and social workers, and other contenders of the mental health profession. So considering that lifespan is what we do. However, I think it's a holistic approach, like to sit with someone again and to not honor those unique differences. And that lifespan development is also a unique difference, that not that we should all think the way that the therapist or the helper thinks, because you're at a particular lifespan. Don't try to bring me up to your lifespan. Know where I am and meet me there. That's the whole stage of change thing. It's articulated in so many ways, but it's just a holistic approach to honoring where we are and how we change psychologically, emotionally, socially, physiologically. It's honoring those differences too. So, we talk about multiculturalism in terms of, age, race, gender, and religion, sexual orientation, and abilities, and those kinds of things. Well, then here's another part of multiculturalism, honoring me where I am at this particular point in my life. And then tailoring your counseling, supervision, and social justice and advocacy approaches to where I am in this part of life. It's important because as a youngster, remember I said, oh no, I'll never have anything to do with that, based on what I saw, and then being a younger person. But then as I aged and became psychologically mature, emotionally mature, then here's the work that I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
But had someone met me at the younger parts of myself, I may still have been stuck, and I don't want to do that. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So again, you have to honor people where they are along this continuum of the lifespan, the continuum of lifespan development.
I love that. It reminds me of the importance of both honoring them and being a continuous learner,
Yes.
I think sometimes in counseling, we get very comfortable in our niches. I know for me for a while, it was like adults or, emerging adults. And then I'm thrusted into doctoral work, and I'm working with a lot of older folks now, and I'm supervising child therapists.
Yes.
And that's very new. And I got comfortable in the adult space.
Yeah.
And you probably see that in your faculty role, kind of people getting comfortable in niches
Oh,
and
yeah.
still showing them the importance of lifespan.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and it's a really good example. Um, as well, we do get comfortable. It's a niche, you begin to master that particular thing, that population, that theoretical orientation. And then, the world is passing you by, right? That whole lifespan development. We're changing. The world is changing. So you always have to be a continual learner, lifelong learner, and continuing to change. And man, change just happens. I used to be the baby on the block, with the psychiatrists and nurses that I'm working with. They were older than me. And now here I am looking at you guys. Uh, and you're the babies on the block. And now I'm the, yeah, I'm the older one, the holder of wisdom,
The
or
why.
what, the one who's passing the mantle and training up the next generation of multiculturally competent counselors and helping professionals. So that's all lifespan development. Things change. We got to roll with it.
And lifespan, like professionally and personally as well.
Yes.
And I think with that in tow, what are kind of some concrete examples, if you can give me 2 or 3, that demonstrate how you incorporate multiculturalism and social justice across lifespan development as a professional counselor, educator, researcher, and supervisor?
I know. Wow, that's loaded. Just
Yeah.
a couple of examples of how I incorporate social justice. Generally, when I get to the lecture about social justice and advocacy, I'm like, it's still the fine print of the counseling profession. And so rather than me lecturing, man, I've been known to take my students to professional organizations in the community. Like I generally take them to NAFAMCA, which is the Northeastern Florida Mental Health Counseling Association. And I'm like, this is social justice and advocacy, because change happens in these boardrooms. I need you to know what these boardrooms look like. Get familiar with the folks who make decisions on your behalf. Make sure you're connected to them. To me, that's social justice and advocacy, and that it is increasing people's social capita, their influential, their sphere of influence, their circle of influence. So social justice and advocacy to me is increasing that, exposing people, connecting people. Sure, change happens in our counseling offices, but bigger macro change happens outside of our offices. We got to get outside of our offices, as well as legislation stuff. I'm like, do y'all know what mental health bills are being passed? Do you know that in Florida, the whole state of Florida, that our suicide rate is higher, that our suicide rate is higher than the homicide rate? But in Florida, we're only concerned about the homicide rate. That's what the news reports. But our suicide rate is higher than that. That's social justice and advocacy to me. So I give that to my students and say, what are we going to do about it? Or the fact that Florida ranks 50 in all states for mental health funding and access. I give it to my students and say, what are we going to do about it? We got power, privilege, influence, y'all educated. What are we going to do? So that's how I incorporate social justice and advocacy. It's doing something. It's not me lecturing. It's not me teaching. It is me modeling and demonstrating, but it's me empowering you to go do something. And man, my students have done some amazing things. One of my students, and I teach a predominantly white population, which has its own challenges. Here's a Black woman talking about social justice, advocacy, race, gender, those kinds of things. But I've had students to go who work in the school systems, and one of them did a presentation on creating culturally informed school systems. And she took it to the school district to do a training to teach them how to make schools safe for families of color and students of color. Amazing. So it's things like that that I believe we can do across this lifespan. And right now, my circle of influence is my students, as well as mental health professionals who come to the Black Mental Health Symposium to be trained to work with Black clients and Black families and in Black communities.
Awesome. I really like that piece about really, and it even ties a little bit intersectionality, right? That like visibility is not enough, right?
Yeah.
The lip service is not enough, but to translate that into action, to translate that into trust and buy-in, right? And like agency. So to hear that story about your student going kind of from your class and hearing these ideas and writing and critical thinking, but then infusing that idea by bringing the school district and bringing some of her knowledge, I think is so powerful. And kind of hearing your development, you know, from how you're using it as a counselor educator, how you're using it as a faculty member. Do you have also any examples of how you use it in supervision or how you use it in research? As a second year myself, like that is like something I try to do.
Oh my God, as far as supervision goes, I absolutely love supervision. And when I'm training supervisees and my students, I supervise them as well as folks in the community. But when I'm supervising them, I always helping them to become aware of what multicultural considerations could be influencing the presenting problem. As you know, how does race, culture, that person's sexual orientation, those kinds of things, how does that influence this presenting problem? What does that have to do with the presenting problem? So that they can begin to conceptualize their treatment plans and those kinds of things with those kinds of considerations. Like, yes, this person might need to be healthy and become more active because they're depressed or anxious or those kinds of things. Let's take a look at where they live. They live over here on Morrow Road. Tell me what kind of eating, what kind of restaurants do they? They have dollar menu restaurants. Okay, there's no smoothie places. There's no gyms.
Yeah.
So social justice and advocacy regarding supervision is what other kind of treatment plan can you give this person to be well and to be whole, considering where they live? That's systemic oppression as well. I mean, that's a whole nother lecture. But living here, right across the street from JU, where there's affluence and then there's, you know, low income and other kind of social barriers. I'm supervising them to say, what other kinds of things can we do? Don't tell me to eat healthy and go to a gym when I don't have access to that. When I'm overworked, when systemically I have to work at these particular kinds of jobs, how can you empower me? So those are some of the things that I do in supervision, always bringing out multicultural considerations and contextual kinds of things. Even the social political climate, I supervise my students in that. We just had a debate where a presidential debate where the president is talking about Chinese flu. But again, being able to bring out all of these kinds of or where he's telling the Proud Boys or white supremacy to stand down and to stand by. I mean, those kinds of things, we can't ignore multiculturalism. We can't. If people do not have any other safe place to go to be able to deal with these things, it should be in our offices as supervisors, as counselor educators, and as counselors. If people can't impact this anywhere else, I pray that I'm raising up a generation of folks that make it safe to do in their practices. Oh, and research. Social justice and advocacy. I just finished a study on natural hair bias and discrimination. It was not my intention to be natural. In fact, when I started the study, I had a relaxer in my hair. Honey, I love my little pixie cuts with the curls. But I would like to be a university president one day. And so I started looking for Black university presidents, and 95% of them had straight hair. And I thought, okay, LaTonya, if you ever want to be a president, you're going to have straight hair. So I thought, well, let me do this study to see if people believe natural hair bias and discrimination keeps them from being promoted at work. So I designed the study, and in the middle of the study, I developed psoriasis on the scalp. I'm like, who wants psoriasis? But of all places I could have gotten it on my body, it was in my scalp. I had to cut my hair all the way down to the quick, get rid of relaxers and those kinds of things. Otherwise, I would have never been natural because I know what the stigma is. I'm perceived as less professional. I'm perceived as incompetent, as ghetto. You know, those kinds of things only because of the appearance of my hair. So I did not want to be natural. But coming
saying it though.
Thank you. I have no choice, right? I have no choice but to be a full Black woman across this lifespan development with who I am today. Thank you so much. But during the course of the study, I had to come to terms with so many things, messages from childhood, Black and nappy head, you know, just those kinds of messages. Women in the study also talked about having to overcome and to reconcile those messages. Parents saying things like, you know, fix your hair, straighten your hair. If you go to the interview, you don't want to scare white folks too soon. Just those kinds of messages that Black women have to overcome to be able to advance in their workplaces. So it came up with some interesting things. But again, that's how I incorporate social justice and advocacy in my research, because as a result of that, I'm saying all of us need to be competent about the Crown Act 2019. All of us need to know where that's heading, and all of us need to legislate. Right now, only 5 states have banned natural hair discrimination. Florida and North Carolina, God forbid, I hope they're not the last, but based on other kinds of laws, we're usually last to get on board.
Yeah.
But if we lobby and if we legislate and if we make our voices heard, perhaps we can move that alone further. Otherwise, Black women will not advance in those particular states with natural hair. And here we are in 2020. I can't advance because my hair is natural. Do you hear me? Yeah. So again, that's just one example of me using my research to shed light on something with hopes to make an impact and a difference for Black women to be able to be university presidents with natural hair.
That is so inspiring to hear, kind of from my positionality, because I feel like in research, you can kind of sign the dotted line on the conclusion and sign the, acceptance of manuscript and submit it and you're done, But what I'm hearing is, you weren't content signing the manuscript of acceptance. You weren't content doing your IRB. You were transmuting the ideas and the power of your research into the policy space and being literate in the policy space.
Yeah. Yes, that's really important. Again, I still feel like advocacy is the fine print of our profession. Of course, it's getting larger where we can see it, but I'm like other professions like social work is deeply embedded in public
Yes.
policy. And counselors, we're not yet. Some of us are, but absolutely, I pull out policy in my classes and say, hey, here's the mental health bill that's getting ready to be passed. What do y'all think about it? Who can we write to? Here's another plight that we're dealing with. To whom can we write, to get this on the board? As well as I serve as the president of FAMCD, or the Florida Association for Multicultural Counseling and Development. And every year, the Florida Counseling Association goes to the Capitol in Tallahassee. And we bring issues to Tallahassee regarding mental health. And of course, I always bring the multicultural piece of the bills for legislators to consider. Yeah,
I think that's absolutely awesome. I think it really ties into, transformative learning and service-oriented learning. And I think that your students are so lucky to have you there, and just being a model, but also really encouraging that critical thinking and not just being content, right, with the textbook, with Sue and Sue, with, whatever people decide to use. I think that's so important. So I think before we wrap up, I would love for you to share, if you want to, any handles, social media, or any handles where people can reach out or contact you for more information. And even just your article, like the name of it, so people can go and read it. Because I think that's absolutely awesome. And it's really hard to get into O Magazine. So I think these sort of things that you want to share that we can both be an asset and advocate for, we'd love to do that.
Yeah, thank you. Again, a concrete example of social justice and advocacy, considering lifespan. Younger people do social media and handles, and thank God I know what that is, because, otherwise I'd be like, girl, what's a handle? All right. So social justice and advocacy, younger people can get on there and do hashtag activism, which I totally believe in, but some people my age don't necessarily believe in hashtag activism. I know it's effective. I've seen the money that it's raised for domestic violence and cancer, and Black Lives Matter, those kinds of things. So you're asking me for my social media hashtag. I have none, except that they're tied to the Black Mental Health Symposium. So I do have a Black MH Symposium for Twitter and Instagram, and can certainly be reached through those social media platforms. I am on Facebook as LaTonya Summers, so I can be found in that way. Most importantly, I can be found here at Jacksonville University, and I can be emailed at lsummer@ju.edu. So that's summer as in summertime and no S, lsummer@ju.edu. I think those are all the ways in which I can be reached, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say older people problems, that's just it. That's the way in which I can be reached. The June 2020 issue of Oprah is actually online, so you don't have to go buy that or go look for that. Just Google it. It's can you be your authentic self at work? Or you could just Google LaTonya Summers and O Magazine, and it'll pop up for you. The article that I'm referencing to natural hair bias has not come out yet. It'll be in the Career Development Quarterly, and it's called Hair We Grow Again, Natural Hair Discrimination and Upward Mobility for Black women. So that will be in the Career Development Quarterly coming up. But you can just Google and see other works that I've done that are in scholarly journals.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. As you guys are watching this awesome video on the interface, I will have a blurb below with all those handles and contact information, and I'll also find a link to the article. Please don't watch this video and just watch it and close it out. Share it with a friend. Use it in your work, right? Let the work not just sit here, but it needs to expand and hit many other voices and souls, and get out there into the academic and non-academic phases as we know it. So, Dr. Summers, we are going to call it a day. I'm going to stop recording very soon. Is there anything else that you would like to say, or any other comments that you'd like to add?
No, I just want to thank you so much for thinking of me. When this particular topic came up, I am just grateful that that you thought of me. Thank you. Very glad to be able to share.
Yeah, anytime.